Hey everybody, it's Sarah with Paint and Party. I am super excited to paint this rustic fall pumpkin with you guys. I have got my stencil here. I've got my paints. I am using folk art paints today. I've got my bright green, which I'm gonna use. I'm gonna mix with a little bit of brown for the leaves. I've got turquoise for the background. I've got dark brown that we're gonna use for the bottom and for the stem. I've got some red that we're gonna mix for the berries at the bottom. And then I've got my black and white. So that's kind of the color palette. If you wanted to change up your background or any other colors, of course, that's fine. Excuse me. And then I've got my basic paint brushes that I usually use. I'm gonna use just a 3/4 inch flat brush for the background. I've got a medium-sized brush, and then I have my little brush that I'm gonna use for those little berries and little swirlies. And I've got an 11 by 14 canvas, which your stencil should fit just perfectly on there, okay? Goodness, excuse me. All right, I've got some water. I've got my tracing paper. So I think I'm ready to go. All right, so I posted this on my Facebook page along with a couple of other paintings, and this one was the winner and the one that you guys liked the best. So I'm hoping that you guys enjoy it, okay? So I've got my large paintbrush. We're gonna start with some white and some turquoise on our brush at the same time. I know I have a line on here, but I'm gonna just wait until I do my background to start stenciling that on. I was just kind of practicing there. So we'll wait on that. But I'm just gonna mix some of this white, some of this turquoise together. You can make it as light or as bright as you want to. So you guys can see I'm trying to do long brush strokes here. That helps to just give it that smooth look. Okay. I also like to use a little bit of water in my background. So I'm just gonna dip my brush in a little bit of water, swoosh it around in my paint. Okay. We also want to get the top and the sides. Slow that over here. Okay. So if you've painted with me before, you know that I always paint faster than most people. So that's the cool thing about painting at home. You can just pause me, take a break, paint as slowly and as meticulously as you want to, okay? So it's kind of like this pumpkin is just sitting on like a shelf of sorts. So we want to give ourselves just like a couple of inches at the bottom, and everybody's is going to be a little bit different. So if yours is a little further up or further down than mine, you just want to make sure, because your pumpkin is going to be, you know, the focus of your painting. So you want to make sure that you've got plenty of room for that pumpkin. sure and get my sides here before my paint dries. Okay, I like it. It's kind of like oceany looking. Okay, so once you get that top part of your background finished, you can rinse out that brush. Dry it off a little bit. Now we're gonna use this dark brown, a little bit of white. When you mix your white in with the dark brown, kind of go to the side of your white paint. I do that so that I don't like ruin the whole pile of paint. Okay, and you don't have to make it one solid color on the plate. You can kind of mix it together on your canvas. And I'm just kind of starting at the bottom here while that turquoise is still drying. Just kind of making this, smoothing this line out a little bit. If your flat brush is really good and flat, you can kind of turn it on its side and smooth that out. Or you can grab a smaller brush if that is easier for you. I always say brushes are a preference. Try them all out, see what you think. Okay, so now we need to let that really good and dry before we put our stencil on there. So if you want to pause me, or you can use a hairdryer, whichever is easier for you, and then we will come back and start working on our pumpkin. Okay guys, so we want to make sure our painting is good and dry. Okay, we don't want our paper to stick to it. All right, so this transfer paper goes shiny side down. If you don't have transfer paper, you could always cut the pumpkin out, or you could wing it, you could freehand it. Okay. So it sits just a little bit below this brown line. Okay, and then we're just gonna take a pencil and trace our lines. I'm just gonna kind of lightly go over these lines. More of a guide than anything. Okay. Ta-da! Oh, it looks like the top of my paper wasn't there. Okay. So there's the outline of our pumpkin. Easy peasy, okay? So we're gonna start with the white. And we're just gonna kind of work our way from there. So whenever I paint a pumpkin, I always start at the top and work my way down, just like how the lines go on the pumpkin. And you can use this medium brush, or you can use, you can use the large brush, or you can use your medium brush. And you just go right on top of that line. And then the bottom of it, we're just gonna kind of round the corners and flatten it out a little. So just kind of come across there. There we go. And we're gonna cover these leaves with green, so if you get a little bit of white in them, it's okay. So you want to stay with that sort of curved lines, just coming down here. It just helps to give that pumpkin look. Instead of going this way, you're just keeping with the lines. And this painting has some of the turquoise in the pumpkin, so it doesn't have to be filled in perfectly, but we can also go back in and add a little bit, just a teeny bit of that turquoise as well if we need to. Depending on what kind of paint you use, some whites cover better than others, so you can always add a second coat, or even just add a second coat to some areas that might need it. Okay. So whether you're gonna put a second coat or not, you do wanna let this get really good and dry before you add any more white on it. Otherwise it will just get goopy and come off of your canvas. So you wanna just let it dry. Okay, so I wanna start working on my stem up here. I'm gonna use my little brush. I'm gonna use some brown paint mixed with some white. And I'm just gonna start with outlining this. And I'm just gonna come down to the top of my white. We're gonna add some more, but we're just gonna fill in a little bit while that's drying. And you want the stem to be a little bit streaky. So if you think of how a pumpkin stem looks, it's not exactly all one flat color, right? So you can have some white and some brown just kind of streaking its way through there. And you could even go in and add some, you know, some black if you wanted to. Okay. Now we're gonna move on to our green leaves. I'm going to start with this little teeny brush. And what I want to do is I want to mix some brown with my green. So I'm just going to put a little bit of brown on there. I'm going to pull a little bit of green off to the side. Doesn't take very much brown at all to darken that up a little. Now, if you already have a dark green color, that's fine. Or if you don't want them to be dark, that's okay too. So I'm just going to give these an outline. And kind of like I said with the stem, it's okay to have some of those colors kind of pop through, where you have maybe more brown in some areas or more green. A little bit more brown in there. We're going to put 2 coats on these, so your first coat doesn't have to be super thick. And if your little brush is too skinny, you can use a medium-sized brush. Sometimes if you use too small of a brush, it will show a lot of those brush lines. Okay. Awesome. Now I'm gonna just pull out my hairdryer and dry this real fast so I can move on. Okay. All right, so we're gonna go back to the white now. Got my big brush. I'm gonna do some white and just a teeny bit of turquoise. Not much at all. And I'm just going to pull my brush down. So the key with doing this shading is you don't need very much paint. And these long brush strokes. Now if we get white back on our leaves, it's okay. We can cover that right up. It's kind of a process where I go from one thing to the next. And I kind of do it for a reason. So you can cover up as you go. If you feel like you got too much of the turquoise, you can always go back and add more white over it. Just let it dry before you do that. If your paint is starting to get kind of goopy, you can always add a little bit of water. Okay, I think I need a little bit more white right there. It's just like really green, or turquoise. And I'm gonna go over that green, guys, so no worries on the mess that I'm making of that leaf. Okay. Just kind of cleaning up this bottom a little bit and adding some more paint on it. You could use your skinny brush if you wanted to. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the way it looks. I'm going to leave it for now. I may add some more after it dries, but I kind of like the way it looks for now, okay? All right, so I'm gonna go back to the skinny brush. All right, I wanna work some more on this stem. So you can see when I filled it in at first, it's just kind of like sitting on top. So we need to add some like little legs on it so that it's like it's growing down out of the pumpkin, okay? So I'm gonna just start at the top here, go back over my lines. Okay. Now these are kind of like little V's. So we're gonna come down off the edge here. Just like make a line that's kind of growing down into there. And then we'll make these smaller than you think they need to be. You can always make them larger. Kind of make it go where it's kind of growing into the leaves there. Okay. I didn't push very hard, just a light touch. Okay. Now, while that background is just a little bit wet, I'm going to make my lines for the pumpkin, okay? So we've got a couple of main lines, and then I think I might do just like some smaller ones. So I'm gonna do one that's gonna come right about here. So what I wanna do is I wanna have a light brown mixture. We don't wanna go in there with dark brown. It will be like too dark. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of come down, curve around to the bottom. If you get it too dark, you can always go back in with some white. You want these to be pretty subtle. Okay. Okay. I've got one more that I'm gonna just kind of come out of the bottom of this leaf here. Just gonna soften that a little bit with my finger. Always a good way if you think you got too much paint on there or you need to soften something, just run your finger over it. Works pretty well. Okay. All right, now I want to do just some really soft lines out here. So we want to mimic the same line. Like that. Okay. Alrighty. While I have my skinny brush, I'm just gonna clean up this bottom a little bit more. Just feel like it needs a little something here. We will put those red berries down there, so that will help too. Okay. All right, so now our green leaves are a mess, so we need to go back in and add another coat to those. And this time we're gonna do some lighter areas too. So I'm going to darken a little more of my paint here. And just gonna go in here and so I'm just using this dark mixture. I've got the green and the dark brown. I'm gonna come in with my smaller brush here around these edges. Okay, now I've still got my green on my brush. I'm gonna grab just a little bit of white. I wanna just come in on the bottom here and just add some shading. Just kind of around the edges. Just give it a little bit of dimension there. I'm gonna add a little bit of green. Doesn't need to be everywhere. This kind of shows the curves. There. Whoa. Okay, so a little too much white there, so I'm just gonna wipe my brush off, come back over it with some green. Beauty of acrylic paint. You can always, almost always, fix things. Okay, I'm gonna need a little bit more white up here. Okay, I like it. All right, so we've got a couple more elements. We've got some red berries down here, and then we've got some little swirlies up here at the top. You want to make sure you've got all of your pumpkin the way you want it before we add those in, because they're going to go on top, okay? Now, these little swirly things up here at the top, you could use a Sharpie if you have one. You could use a paint pen, or you can use your brush, but I'll show you guys how to do those. We're going to start with the berries at the bottom. So I'm using red paint. I'm gonna add a teeny bit of brown. I wanna darken it up so it's more of a cranberry color. And this is really the only thing I'm gonna use this red for, so just gonna mix it up here. Okay. Now, if you're mixing with your little brush, rinse it out. Kind of start all over with that. Okay. All right, now you want your brush to be clean for these skinny lines. Let's put a little bit of water on it, and let's mix some water in with our paint. Not a lot, but that is just gonna help you to get that paint on there a little bit more smoothly. Now make sure your brush doesn't have a bunch of water in it. You don't wanna have runs down your canvas. Okay, So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a vine that goes all the way across. So we want it to come up here. And you wanna be able to see this. So if you got your red too dark, if you're like, oh, it looks brown, you could always go back over it with some brighter red. So it's not a straight line. It's kind of curvy. Okay. All right, now we've got little vines that are gonna come out of this. And I always say when I do something like this, you wanna make it grow out of the vine. So it's just like a tree. When you look at a tree, the branches don't grow straight out, they angle. Okay, so I've got a really light touch. If your brush gets too much paint in it, just wipe it off and start all over, or rinse it to get that really skinny line. Okay, so we want to add these little baby branches all the way across. So if you struggle with these branches and you decide you want to cover any of them up, do me a favor and make sure it is very, very, very dry, because you will have a pink mess on your pumpkin. So make sure you let it dry, use a hairdryer or whatever. Not that anyone is going to do that, but it's worth mentioning. Okay. Okay, so now we've got berries on the ends of these. So they're just little dots, so you can do two ways. You can use the plastic end or you can use the paintbrush end. I like the paintbrush end. They're about the size of a pea, a little bit smaller. If your branches are bigger than mine, then make your berries a little bit bigger. You could always add a little bit of white in these too, just to give them some depth, some dimension. Okay. And don't be afraid to really glop that paint on there. They look better when they're thicker. Okay, he's really coming together. Okay. Okay, I love how those berries turned out. They're super cute. So I want to rinse my brush here. And if any of those berries kind of look flat or like they need some more color, you could always add another coat on top of them. But I'm just gonna rinse my brush here, and I'm gonna do those little swirlies at the top. So if you don't want them, you don't have to do them, but I'm gonna just add a few. So I'm just gonna bring one here, really super light touch. Let's see, add one down here. Just barely pressing on the canvas. Okay, now if you want to add any of the swirlies down here, you can. You have some spots where you feel like you need something. Okay, I think maybe one more right here. Okay. All right, and that is it for our rustic pumpkin. I love how it turned out. Like I said, I think you could use any other colors you wanted. If you wanted to add anything else to it, you can. I think it's super fun. If you guys have any questions, let me know. If you want to send me a picture of yours, I would love to see it. And I hope to paint with you again really soon. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.